Welcome to Hanging Out with Successful Bar Exam Students. This is episode 23, I think. Not sure of that, but I think it's 23. But it's definitely going to be one of the more unusual episodes that we've done in the past year because we have a very special guest, somebody who has been, I think it's safe to say, has been through an ordeal quite unlike virtually anything else that I've experienced. So I want to just say hi and welcome what I think is going to be the newest member of the Georgia Bar, and that's Kimberly Campbell. Hi, Kimberly. How are you?
Hello. I'm great, Jackson. How are you?
I'm great. And I see here we are matching. That was totally unplanned. So just before we came online, you said that your daughter is getting married this weekend. So
yes.
Congratulations. That's awesome.
Thank you.
So it's not like there isn't a whole lot that's been going on for you, huh?
Yeah, a lot's been going on.
Yeah.
It's been quite a week.
I bet it has. For our audience, we've got a wide audience. Some people who are familiar with the Georgia exam, many people who are not. I want to really give you the chance to tell your story. It's an extraordinary story on probably 2 or 3 different levels, at least. But I want to start with the sort of the big story of the moment and sort of how all this happened. And in that big story, I want to just sort of start by bringing people up to speed, so bear with me for a minute. For those of you that don't know, the Georgia Bar Examiners last week made an announcement that they had gone back and looked at and reviewed bar exam scores from July of 2015 and February 2016. So 2 exams. We're still waiting on the July 2016 results to come out, but 2 exams back. And that in doing that review, they had discovered internally that they had made a mistake in the scoring and that a total of 90 applicants from those 2 exams were incorrectly identified as having failed the exam and were now being told they passed. So there we go. Okay, so now, Kimberly, you're one of the 90. I mean, I'm not trying to spoil the lead here, but tell us what happened.
Okay, so I was in a shoe store and I received a text from one of my coworkers, and the text said, "Did you see this?" And there was, I guess, some kind of posting or something that was on the Georgia website that said, we'd made a mistake on some. And I texted him back and I said, "This is some kind of scam. It's got to be, a joke or whatever." And mind you, when I went into the shoe store, I had just finished listening to one of your lectures because I was trying to get my mind together to resit again for next February. So I've been listening to some of your lectures. And so I thought, wow, this is crazy. This isn't, really happening. And in the midst of that, I had received an email earlier that morning from the Georgia Bar that said, go back to your webpage and look. But I didn't go back to my webpage. I just thought it was just one of those one of those messages. And so I was like, okay, it doesn't pertain to me. I didn't check it. I didn't think any more about it. So when this coworker sent this and he said, yes, it's real. And I was talking to him in the middle of the shoe store and I asked him if he received an email as well. And he says, no, I haven't gotten anything because he sat for July's bar, this past July's bar. And he said he had not received anything. So he's like, get off of this phone and go check your email right now, because why else would they be emailing you? So I checked the email in the middle of the shoe store and it said that it was a revised bar exam results was the title of it. And when I checked the email and it said that, I fell to the floor in the middle of the shoe store, started bawling. And I immediately called him back and I was crying. So I called him, then I called my husband, and then I called you, Jackson. And I think I was still bawling when I called you.
You were. So just to put it a little bit in context, earlier that day, I had gotten notice from the Georgia examiners of what had happened, but I didn't have the list. So I knew that there were a handful of people, and we're going to circle back around to this, but the upshot was that you had failed the bar by 1 point.
Yes.
which was unbelievable and
Right.
excruciating. And I
Right.
want to talk a little bit about that in a minute. But I thought, well, okay, if there's anybody that's potentially in that group, I think Kim probably is in that group. So then I'm sitting at home watching, I don't know, whatever, television. And my phone rings and I see your name on the caller ID and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, could it really be? I mean, in 25 years, I've never had anybody get their score reversed. Is it possible? And it's a good thing I knew what was happening because it was you were completely, you're like,
Right.
I just heard I heard you sobbing, and I thought, oh my God, tell me that they didn't tell her she failed again. But then I could tell you were in fact laughing, crying, and it was like, holy cow, this is unreal. So
Right.
did the examiners actually call you at any point to say, here's what's
Okay, so
happening?
I got that letter, and a couple of days after that, yes, the chairman of the Board of Examiners did call me.
Mm-hmm.
He said he wanted to reach out and apologize for everything that had happened, and just sort of, gave me an explanation of he was sure to let me know that they had just found out. So it wasn't, I was like, okay, whatever.
Yeah. Yeah. Did he give you an explanation that I mean, of any substance? I mean, or was it just we made a mistake and we fixed it?
Well, no, he basically just said that mine was one of the ones that had gone for a rescore, that I scored a certain grade on it, and they rescored it, and in their rescore they had taken me to a passing in some kind of way. It was not reflected when they sent out the letter.
Yeah.
And so, but at that point, I'm okay with that explanation for now. It was just an explanation, because if you'll remember, Jackson, I was pretty upset when I got that letter and 1 point. So I actually called the board of, I called them and I was like, hey.
I remember, every year there's a handful of people across the country that I work with who fail by a point or two.
Mm-hmm,
and there's nothing more excruciating, because that's arbitrary. At a point or 2 points, there's nothing, we can't say, oh, well, you did something wrong. It just happened. And I remember, and I wanted to interview you as a passing student long before any of this ever happened, simply because I thought your story which I want you to tell in a minute, but your story of getting there and getting to that point and taking the exam and the work you put in and the growth that you had exhibited, and to come a point short seemed just like unusually cruel and awful.
Yeah.
And it was devastating to you. I know that. And I know that, in fact, this was the February 2016 exam that you got that result on.
Right.
And you actually decided that you weren't going to take the July 2016 exam because it was just emotionally too much, right?
Well, right. And actually had signed up to take July and decided 2 weeks out, 2 weeks before the exam, that I just couldn't do it. I was just, too drained. I had too much going on in my life. And so for the first time in a long time, I decided not to take the bar exam.
Yeah, so let's circle back around.
Okay.
And I appreciate, as always, with everyone that does these interviews, but certainly in your case, I really appreciate your transparency, because I know it's not easy to talk about some of these things. And yet, I also know that in our listeners, in our audience, we've got people who are probably in similar situations who are going to take great hope and great encouragement from your story. So I just want to say, on behalf of all those people, thanks for being willing to share this. But how many times did you take the exam in Georgia?
Okay, the February 2016 was my 6th time.
Okay.
And so quite a few times. I actually graduated from law school in 2013, and I sat for every bar since I graduated.
Right. And where did you go to law school?
I went to the Charlotte School of Law.
Okay, right. And so, and then you went in and took the Georgia bar, and the first time you studied with me was February 2016.
Right.
So,
right.
But you had prepared some other ways prior to that, right? You'd taken some other courses.
Right. I did, of course, right out of law school, I did the big box,
Yeah.
just like everyone else does. And that did not work out for me. I actually did a one tutor,
Mm-hmm.
and then I studied on my own.
Mm-hmm.
And when I came to you, I had just hired another tutor, which
Right.
was a real disaster. And I emailed you prior to coming to you, and we spoke, because that had been I was really in a mess after I came from that
Yeah,
tutor.
and it was, and I'm not going to throw shade at this person, but the part of what you described was this process in which this person just made you feel really bad. Is that right?
Yes,
I mean, they discouraged you, they demotivated you, they didn't give you much in
exactly.
the way of assistance or help. Now, to be fair, I have people that probably say the same thing about me from time to time. I'm not known for being warm and fuzzy. I don't know why. My grandchildren love me.
I don't know why
I don't
either.
know. But what was the experience like in working with Celebration Bar Review versus what you had been doing? Can you share with people what was different?
Well, okay. So when I had looked at some of your videos prior to actually contacting you, and what you said on those just sort of made sense to me. I mean, it just sort of felt like the way I thought and the way I think about things. So, it was. And when I called you, and when I emailed you and I told you what my experience was, just the response that you gave back, and when I actually spoke with you on the phone, and I think when I contacted you, I was actually waiting on some results at that
You
point as
were,
well.
yeah,
I was waiting on October, I guess July's results from 2015,
yeah,
and so you pretty much, I was pretty convinced at that point that I had not passed because of the experience that I had. And so I was just waiting, then for the results. And I think you suggested that I go ahead and get started and start slow, just with the basic, which is what I did. And I didn't get really in depth. I just started looking at some of the information. And so when I got the actual results, I decided to do the mentoring one,
hmm,
because I knew that I needed to work on my writing.
right,
So when we started working together, it was actually every week I would tell my husband, and we were just so elated, because just your approach, and just the way that you handled me, it was, it wasn't like I was just and I mean, and everyone can see I'm not 23,
oh,
so
I'm stunned to hear that. I'm stunned to hear that. Okay.
So, I was a mature student, and I needed to be treated in such a way and you treated me always with respect, and we were able to work through some things that I guess I had problems with. And in working with you, I didn't feel that I was so far off. I sort of felt like, well, maybe I can do this thing, because I was really doubting myself.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. I think that self-confidence was the biggest thing.
yeah,
You had been so demoralized by
right.
your prior experience and by what your mentor or teacher had told you. And
Hmm.
so I expected to see some pretty not good work at the beginning, and I was really pleasantly surprised. I was like, okay, wait a minute, she actually knows the law. She understands what we're doing. And I say, and I stress this to people all the time, you were teachable.
Right.
That I was saying, here's how I want you to write, and you weren't saying, well, I did it this other way unsuccessfully 6 times, so I'm just going to keep doing that. You were like, okay, I'm all in. Just tell me what to do, I'll do that. And the work was good. It was solid right from the beginning, and it just kept getting better. And I think, was there a point in time where it began to sort of sink into you that you actually knew what you were doing, that it was working for you, and starting to get that feeling like, yeah, I'm on track here?
Yeah, I mean, I guess maybe sort of halfway through, and when I started getting feedback from you, and I would get the feedback was consistent,
Mm-hmm.
and I was like, okay, maybe I do know what I'm talking about, because I had been beat up, so uh, it started to sink in that maybe, and really your approach, Jackson, and the method that you use, it just made sense. And so it was easier to do because I wasn't fighting against something that just didn't seem natural. I mean, the whole Iraq thing or whatever, that just never seemed, not even in law school, it just didn't seem, and my dad always told me, well, it's because you have so many life experiences. You keep trying to put your life, but it just, it just didn't seem natural. And the way you teach it, it just flowed. So,
and the great news is you'll never have to use Iraq again.
Yes, that's wonderful news.
Isn't that amazing? Incredible, incredible news. I think that you began to get this growing self-confidence, and as we talk, you were doing the work. I mean, and these are the things that I say to people when they say, well, how do you get to passing when you haven't? And I say, well, you got to be teachable, and you were. You have to be disciplined and do the work. You did the work. You want to talk a little bit about how you scheduled yourself? Because you were like clockwork with the work and our conferences and all the rest of that. How did you put that all together?
Well, okay, so I was studying full time, but it was just sort of refreshing for me, and it was easy to do because all the other 5 times that I had studied, I had just put so much into my studies and did the whole, 15 hours or 20 hours a day type thing. So you don't really advocate for that much a day. So that was just, that was welcoming. And, I was really open to not having to study that many hours a day. As a matter of fact, my family would be like, okay, aren't you supposed to be studying? I'm like, I've already done my studying for today. So it was actually, really easy to incorporate your style of studying. And I just followed your outline. And I followed the outline for each day. And if the outline said do 3 hours today or whatever, or whichever assignments, that's what I did. And if it took 3 hours, I was like content with the fact that, okay, 3 hours is what I put in. And I think I started early enough so that I didn't have to cram. So I had enough time and it felt comfortable. It felt right.
Yeah, you did all of that. And I think in addition, you weren't putting your time in trying to memorize. You were actually using that life experience that you had.
Right. Yeah, and that was a big thing because when I first contacted you, I remember telling you I don't have a good memory, and that's what I thought had been my downfall, was because I could not just memorize all of this law verbatim. I was trying to, in each exam, I would just get so flustered because I try to go in and just memorize rule statements, and put those on the paper. And that was not the way to go.
Yeah.
So
when you put all that together, so this regular disciplined work, the fact that you were writing in a style that we teach, that was built on making arguments and using life experience and using the law rather than memorizing it, the fact that you had a regular steady work schedule, but you weren't exhausting yourself, all of that kind of steamrolled, and you were making great progress and really a lot of confidence, I think, going in. And in fact, I felt very comfortable that you had passed February 2016. So like you, I was really surprised at the result. And and then 1 point off. And I think I said to you, it's almost personal at that point. I mean, it's almost somebody in the bar examiner's office saying, well, we've got a quota, we've got some number, and you didn't make it.
Right.
There's a lot of rumor and conjecture about what really happened in Georgia with this scoring, and I know a class action lawsuit has either been filed or about to be filed, and the suits against the company that scored it, not the bar examiners themselves, which is all kind of odd and weird. And I'm not going to ask you to comment about the litigation since you may be a party to it, but I think that it's interesting for our listeners to know that historically, like if a result comes in and you called the examiners and said, this just doesn't feel right, based on everything I'm doing and my studies and so on, it just didn't feel right. Your gut was right, but to be vindicated is really extraordinary, isn't it? I mean, yeah,
it really is, because when I came out of the exam, I contacted you again and I said, I feel great. I almost felt like in the exam, going through those 2 days, I felt as if I had been given the answer sheet, because I just knew what to do, and I knew. So when I came out of there, like no other time before, I knew that I had passed.
Yeah.
And so to get that result and be, I just didn't feel that it was, it didn't feel right. My husband kept saying, Kim, God's going to take care of this. And you passed this test. And he just kept saying that. I mean, he had said that maybe even like a few weeks ago. And I'm like, okay, at this point, I had lost all faith. I was like, okay, you know what? You're crazy, and, go someplace. But he still believed. And so I got to give him a shout out for that, because he just kept saying, and what are the chances of something like that happening the way that it did?
In 25 years, I've worked with literally thousands and thousands of people. I cannot recall, it may have happened, but I cannot recall another time when there was an overturned score. Now, historically, there have been fewer than 50 cases across the country since the multi-state started, where scores were reversed or changed, but they didn't even change results. I mean, they didn't change going from failing to passing. So this is unprecedented. There's nothing like this before. And, I think about the hours you spent studying, after that exam, and then just being so discouraged because of the result. And then your decision right before the last July exam to say, you know what, I'm just not ready emotionally. Can you talk, I know this is not easy to talk about, can you talk a little bit about what your thought process was and why you decided at that point, a couple weeks before the test, to just stop and take a break?
Well, okay, I had started a new job, and then, we were in the middle of my daughter getting married, so I was doing that. But that was not the real thing, because I was just used to jumping back on the horse and doing it again. But for this time, I just couldn't do it. And I had done it 5 other times. I continued on and I pushed through, because I wanted to show my family and more so my children that you don't give up. You just keep trying. So I've always done that. And
okay.
Sorry.
Yeah. No, that's okay. This is
so.
Yeah. Let's talk about your children a little bit. What was their reaction when they heard this news?
Oh my goodness. So I called. I have a son that's in college, and my daughter, my older daughter, was here. And so I called them both on the phone. And of course, I called them after I called you, Jackson. So I was still crying. So they were, like,
sorry, kids.
So they were like going, what's going on? What's going on with mom? So I called one and I said, hold on a second. I got something to tell you all. And I called the other one and put them on. And everybody just started screaming, and they were crying, and it just sort of hit home just how emotional and how trying this has been for my family. Mm-hmm. So to then be able to tell everyone that, it's finally over.
And what a great sense of timing before your daughter's wedding. I mean, for you to be able to get in and be able to enjoy this event without this hanging over your head is awesome.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
So what's next for you? Now that you found out that you've passed, what happens now?
I'm going to Disney World. No.
Which is where I live, by the way. I'm right here.
Right. Okay. I'm coming to see you, Jackson. Okay. I don't know. And before, I have a couple of colleagues that have expressed interest in me maybe joining forces with them and practicing. I'm currently working in a compliance legal department in one of the large financial institutions. So, I'm just still trying to see which direction I'll go.
To put that ESQ behind your name and just roll it off your lips a little bit. Exactly. Yeah, Kimberly Campbell, lawyer. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And your family walk around saying, "Yes, counselor. What's your
Oh yeah, that's exactly right. It's been a long time coming.
Yeah. What an amazing. I mean, it's your accomplishment on so many levels. As not being a young person, though I do think you look pretty young. But not right out of undergraduate into law school.
Right.
So already working with a family, going to law school, taking the bar, going through this kind of process and ordeal, getting mislabeled on the scores, then passing. What an amazing story on so many levels, but also what an amazing inspiration. And I suspect that there are people who are going to be watching this or listening who are going to say, oh my gosh, how did she do it? How did she put it all together? How did that happen? What advice would you offer someone who's feeling that discouragement that you felt, that maybe feels like, oh my gosh, I just can't, it's just not coming together for me? Is there anything you could say to them?
I would just say, do not give up. I think through all of this, I didn't give up. Even when I didn't have the strength to keep going, I had a good support system. So if you have a good support system, if you don't have a good support system, call Jackson. and he's really good about that. Call me.
Yeah.
But I would just say, don't give up, because eventually it's going to happen. And, some people, we always say in our house, we just don't do anything on the first try, so it's just sort of par for the course. But just keep going and keep trying. And really, I think, Jackson, I think what my thing was, I don't think that initially and the times before, I just don't think that I had a good study system, and I don't think I had people that really understood what it takes to pass the bar. And I think that made all the difference, just when I got with you and just your methodology, and it just made sense, and I think that made the difference for me. So,
well, I appreciate that, and I want to be among the many, many, many people who are offering you congratulations. I am exceedingly proud of you. I'm proud of the accomplishment, but I'm really more proud, I suppose, of the character that you've displayed through all this. It would be very easy, I think, in this circumstance, to be bitter, to be angry. This was not fair. It was a horrible mistake to have occurred. And yet I will say, in this interview and in our phone call, I've not heard 1 ounce of that. And that speaks to your graciousness as an individual. And I know that even when you were so frustrated with your prior teacher, that you weren't, it wasn't that you were trying to throw them under the bus. It was just, this isn't working for me, and here's why.
Right.
And I think that is a sign of maturity. It's a sign of wisdom that as a member of the bar, we could use more people, we can use more Kimberly Campbells in the bar in Georgia and everywhere else. Yeah. And so I'm excited for you to become a member of the bar and to bring that spirit and that sense of wisdom to your peers and to the community. I'm so appreciative that you would share your time in this story with us today. Certainly with the wedding coming on, I don't want to keep you much longer. Before we hit the record button, folks, I mean, there's chaos in there. I mean, the whole family.
You're right.
So this is really above and beyond. But I do know that a lot of people are interested in what's going on in Georgia. They're interested in your story. I suspect that we haven't heard the last of what's happened there.
Right. Yeah.
We may hear other states where this same company was involved, and perhaps there are problems elsewhere. To me, and I'd be interested in your comment. I think at least the Georgia bar examiners made a lot of mistakes here, but I guess they're to be commended for at least trying to correct it and get to the right result.
Right.
Sort of like a referee in a football game, with instant review. I mean, it may take a really long time to get under the hood, but at least they got the call right at the end. Is that sort of your feeling about it?
Yeah, that's my feeling. It's a little bittersweet as well, because the colleague that I told you, he sat also for July and February's bar, both bars, but he did not get that same result, and he didn't make it by 3 points. So on the one hand, I'm happy, and but I still think maybe there's some more that they need to do, because how did they come at that 90? Yeah. I'm glad, but there's still other people that, like him, that were not.
Well, those are questions that are definitely being raised. Yeah. I mean, why 90 seems like a really nice, neat number.
Right.
Has it happened elsewhere? Did it happen in other exams?
Right.
I think, when the examiners lose the trust in the fairness of the system, they're in trouble. And I think this goes to some of that integrity. I think it is commendable that the chairman of the board of the bar examiners called you directly and
yes.
They reached out to you. This will be an interesting story to watch, and perhaps we'll come back and have you do an addendum in
right, right, yeah.
We'll see what we discover.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, and I mean, the chairman thanked me for the way I seem to be handling it. He said because everyone was not quite handling it the same, but at this point, 6 times, I'm just glad for it to be over.
Yeah, I know it breaks your heart to not be listening to my lectures anymore.
No, that was a good part.
Well, you're very kind. Well, Kimberly, I want to thank you again, and I want to congratulate you. And I know that I speak for all of our audience in saying this is one where the good guys win. Yes. And we are so proud of you and so pleased for you.
Thank you.
And, just look forward to great things for you and for your family. And thank all of them from me, for their support of you, because I know it was a big deal. So anything else you want to add today before we...
No. I just, the only thing, I just want to thank you, Jackson. I just want to thank you for what you do. And I don't know how I came to find you. I just think it was God. So I think this whole thing has been, just the way it's all handled. So I just want to thank you. I want you to continue doing what you're doing, because there are a lot of people. I'm giving your name. I have given your name to a lot of people. So just thank you, thank you, thank you.
Great. And when you come to Disney World, I'm right here. I promise.
Okay, I'll definitely
get together and have a cold iced tea. So
yeah, absolutely.
Well, listen, please wish your daughter great success in her wedding and the marriage, and have a great time this weekend. I know it's going to be with a huge burden lifted off your shoulders.
Yes. I can really enjoy.
All right, we're going to sign off for now. Thanks everybody for being with us, and we'll be back with you next time when we talk to another successful bar exam taker.